the big sugya of Chomer Medina, Lamaisa, it's one of these sugyas that it's difficult to talk about because mitzad echad, there's a lot of literature which is explicit about what exactly is one supposed to do, klape the sugya. What is one permitted to make kiddush on? What's one permitted to make avdala on? Mitzad sheni, there's minhagim. Minhagim Yisrael is kaddish kedoshim, and we know that the minhag Yisrael and a lot of the things that are negeya Chomer Medina, they don't seem to stem with the literature that we're going to learn tonight. So vada mitzad echad, we're on a tightrope. We have to know what's the right halacha, what's halacha l'maisa, hamaisa shar yasun, and mitzad sheni, we're on the tightrope because there's minhag Yisrael, and minhag Yisrael, of course, is the reason that we're here today. So we have to try, Bez Hashem, kedarka shel Torah, to learn the sugya and to try to figure out is there may be some way to shtim the minhag Yisrael. And even if not, to at least the kol hapachas try to figure out what is the minhag and what is the halacha, and the dvar Hashem zu halacha, alavai will have siyata d'shmaya. This is a sugya which you see already all the way in the Gemara in Pesachim and Daf Kuf Zayin. The Gemara brings a story about Ameimer, that Ameimer one time he came to a certain town, Zimna Chada Ikla Ameimer la'asrin, v'lo havelei chamra, and he didn't have wine. I seen a shichra, so they gave him beer, v'lo avdil. And he didn't make Avdallah, ubas tavis, and how did that? He fasted, because without Avdallah, so you can't eat. The macher terachna v'sayin lechamer, the next day, they brought him wine. V'avdal, he made Avdallah the next day. L'shana, the next year, su'ikla la'asr, and he came back to the city. Lehav lechamer, again they didn't have wine, and again they brought him beer, the same story. Omar, ihachi chamer medina hu. If that's the case, I see over here that it's Chomer Medina, and I could make Havdalah. So we see already in this Gemara a precedence to be able to make Havdalah on Chomer Medina. We don't see anything about Kiddush, and we do see that even Ameimer refrained. Why didn't Ameimer just jump in and say, okay, they brought me a beer, let's make Havdalah. Most of us, if they would bring us a beer, especially Motzei Pesach, so then we would right away, we would make Havdalah. Ameimer refrained the first year. He even sat in a tainus that night, and he didn't have Malav Malka. The next year he came back and then he was willing to make Avdal. He said, oh, this is already Chomer Medina. I see this is the drink of the Medina. This is the drink of the city. So this is going to Hashem, this compounds our problem a little bit. The Gemara talks about Avdallah and the Gemara doesn't talk about Kiddush. And the Gemara says that there is a makom to refrain, but the next year he didn't refrain. So let's try to figure this out. The Gemara that the Olim saw is a different Gemara. The Gemara Pesachim and Daf Kuf Zayin and Aleph, and the Gemara brings down a whole shaila over here about making kiddush on beer. We just discussed Avdallah on beer, and it seems to be clear that you can make Avdallah on what's called Chomer Medina. The Talmidei Chachamim over here don't need me to give akdamas and understand what's Chomer Medina. We all know the shailas of whiskey, the shailas of beer, the shailas of coffee, the shailas of tea. That Emir Hashem. We'll try to figure out tonight. That's our big agenda today for you guys. But that's our big agenda over here. We have to figure out, are we allowed to make a Kiddush, Avdallah on Chomer Medina? And if we are, then what is Chomer Medina? And what are the Agbalas that tell us yes to make Avdallah or not to make Avdallah on Chomer Medina? So let's try Bez Hashem. So the Gemara says over here in Pesachim and Daf Kuf Zayin, that by Minei Rav Huna Rav Chizda, Ma'ol Kedusha Shichra. Can you make Kiddush on beer? So the Gemara brings down big machlekes. The Gemara brings down all the different Amoraim, discussed the Shaila Rav and Rav Mechia and Rav Chia Rabbi, and nobody knew what to do. Could you make Chomer Medina on Kiddush? So the Gemara brings down Kiddushay Udaloi Makdishin and Avdule Mavdila. So the Gemara says, no, Kiddush, you can't make Chomer Medina, you have to use wine. But Havdalah you could. Rav Chizda says, Rav says, Kishem, that you can't make Kiddush, you can't make Avdallah. Then the Gemara says, Itmer Nami, Kishem, Shem Mekachin, Kachem Mavdilan. It's looking very bleak. When you look in the Gemara, it sounds like it's really not so pashut to be making Kiddush, even Avdallah on Chomer Medina. So this, we go right to the Rambam. The Rambam in Perek Chavtes Halacha Yud Zayin. The Rambam brings down Medina, that roiv of the drink of that Medina is beer. Says the Rambam, you can't make Kiddush. The Rambam paskins no Kiddush on Chomer Medina. You can only make Kiddush on wine. Mutar la'avdallah, but you could make Avdallah. And that's the psak of the Helik Rambam. There are other Rishonim that argue and they say you could make on Kiddush. What's Lamaisa, the psak of the Mishabura? Says the Mishabura and Tzivkot and Chav Zayin in our Simon Reish Ayin Beis. Ledina, you must be machmir lechatchila. Don't make Kiddush at night on any drink except for wine or on bread. And that I think everyone agrees that's the Minig Yisrael. That at night we don't find people making Kiddush on wine. Making Kiddush on Chamer Medina. We find that people make Kiddush on wine. We don't find that. We find during the day that people make Kiddush on schnapps and beer. Well, not maybe beer, but schnapps, etc. We'll have to talk about that. Maybe a coffee for a woman, etc. But upon him, that is clear that at night, the Mishabura says you should not make Kiddush on Chamer Medina at night. If a person doesn't have wine for whatever reason, so you should make Kiddush on bread. What should be the difference? Why would the day Kiddush be any different? Over here, the Mishnah Berurah brings down Kiddush on Chamer Medina in a place which has wine. We're going to talk soon. If there's no wine, maybe it's a whole different story. But what's the halacha if it's during the day and you want to make Kiddush on schnapps, on beer, on whatever we'll deem in a moment? That'll be a second shlav of what's considered Chamer Medina. But what's the halacha if you want to make Kiddush on Chamer Medina in the day in a situation of where there is wine? Where there is wine. So the Mishnah Berurah over here says the Mishnah Berurah, Aval yayin b'makim shu matzi vada yivarech alav. This is a shocking Mishnah Berurah. Sivkat and Chavtes. Mishnah Berurah says, if you have wine during the daytime, vada you should make. If you don't have wine, so then yes, you can make on Chamer Medina during the day. At night, you never make on wine on Chamer Medina. At Havdalah, you certainly are going to be allowed. We'll see soon to make Havdalah on Chamer Medina. But during the daytime, so the Mishnah Berurah says, if you're in a place of al yayin, if you have yayin during the day, vaday yivarech alav, avad afilu b'yayin, and that's muchach and reif beites. Umikol makayim, says the Mishnah Berurah, but Medina is saying in our Medinas, the yayin is biyoiker, the yayin is expensive. V'roiv shtiyas Medina, he says by us, we don't drink wine. Most of the drinks in our Medinas are shar mashkin. Loi nagu. Even the gedolim are not noyig. That's what he says. Even the greatest people in Kallus are not noyig during the day to make kiddush on the wine, because it's only the Rabbanan and there's saimich on the mekilim that you could use Chamer Medina for kiddush. Umishabei mevarech gam b'yoyim. A person that wants to know what's the mitzvah min hamuvcher, says over here the Mishnah Berurah and Sivkot and Chavtes. If you want to know what's the mitzvah min hamuvcher, the mitzvah min hamuvcher is even during the day to make kiddush on wine. But here the Mishnah Berurah is talking about a situation of where the wine is very expensive. So that says the Mishnah Berurah, when the wine is very expensive, so then at night still make on wine or make on bread. During the day, if the wine is very expensive, so then we find that was the minig that the Gedol Yisrael, they made even on schnapps, we'll see soon, even on beer, whatever, on Chamer Medina. But the Mishnah Berurah ends that even in a place where the wine is very expensive, says the Mishnah Berurah, the mitzvah min hamuvcher, the right thing, vaday oiseh mitzvah min hamuvcher, is that you make kiddush on wine, and that's the mitzvah min hamuvcher. But I must tell you, it's very interesting. The Bach in Zivkot in Yud over here, he brings down that we have to be matama. This was written about 400 years ago, and the Bach writes that we have to be matama the minig Yisrael. But he says minig kol Yisrael mikachim baboiker on beer. The meaning of all of Klal Yisrael in Krakow in the 1600s, says the Bach, is that they made kiddush on beer, not schnapps. Interesting. They made kiddush on beer. And he says, and even though they have wine in their houses, and not only do you think this was Stam and Minig, what was 400 years ago, what did the Aguda have a convention about? If you ever want to know, what was the Aguda convention in Krakow 400 years ago? So over here, says the Bach, he tells us at this convention, this was in he writes, that everyone was talking about this. There was Mari Shachna was there, and that Mari Shlomo Luria, the Marshal, the Yam Shlomo was there, and they all were discussing one major shaila. They said it's true that this Kanim, Ki Heidu Askenim, that everyone agreed that everybody makes kiddush on beer. And even though they have wine, I thought that there's wine in the city. Okay? And not Balayla, okay? Veloy Baboiker. By the
way, HaRav, the reason why the Bach mentioned beer and not schnapps is because in the 1600s they didn't yet have schnapps in Poland. And schnapps, as we understand it, only developed towards the end of that, the late 1600s, early 1700s. That's the
but they had, I think they had something, they had a drink that the Paiskim will discuss called med.
they had.
Med was like their schnapps.
Yeah, but that's not what we call grain alcohol. They didn't have yet because they didn't have the fermentation process. Okay.
I got it. They were making kiddush on beer, and everybody at the convention was discussing what's the pshat that they make kiddush on beer, and no one had an answer. It's against halacha, says the Bach. If you're in a place that has wine, you should be making kiddush on wine. They didn't come to a haschala to be miyashiv the minig, and they felt it was shaloi al pidin. The pshita, the yayin comes first, and if you have a choice of wine or beer during the day, at night for sure not, but during the day, if you have a choice between wine or beer, you're supposed to be making kiddush on wine, which compounds our problem. Rabbi Isai, mitzad echad, it compounds our problem because you see what the halacha requires. The halacha says during the day, you're supposed to be making kiddush on wine. If you have wine, even if the wine is expensive. We'll see about us in a moment that we have wine and wine is normal by us, but it seems to be you're supposed to be making kiddush on wine. Mitzad sheni, if you look good in the Bach, so you see that the Bach says this was Mini Kol Yisrael, and he's coming to fight Mini Kol Yisrael, but he says it was Mini Kol Yisrael. That means that all the Skeinim and all the Rabbanim and all of Klal Yisrael were making kiddush in the daytime on Chamer Medina and not on wine, even in situations where they had wine. So it compounds the problem. In other words, this is an old problem, Rabbi Yisai. Should you be making kiddush on wine in a situation of where you have wine, but there's a minhag that people make kiddush on beer? We'll see schnapps and whatnot. This is an old problem. But before we begin, the Mishnah Berurah just said, mitzvah min hamuvchar, no question. If a person wants to know what's the mitzvah min hamuvchar, the mitzvah min hamuvchar is to make kiddush on wine. If you have wine, even if the wine is expensive. That's l'chayra, what it says also in the Aruch HaShulchan and Sivkat Yudalid. He says, zevadai al yayin, yoiser toiv mikoila mashkin, bein the kiddush, bein lavdala, bein al koishal brach. It's always better to be making kiddush even during the day on wine. Now, I must tell you, there was a yid, I once gave a shir about this, and I said over that it's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to be making kiddush on wine. It's a mitzvah min hamuvchar, and I brought from the Aruch HaShulchan, and I brought from the Mishnah Berurah that it's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to be making kiddush on wine. And so there was a yid there, and he said, you know what? It's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to listen to the Minig Yisrael. And the Minig Yisrael was that they made kiddush on schnapps and beer, etc. I don't know if that's exactly an accurate taina. It sounds very, very, aggressive, but I don't know if it's such an accurate taina, Rabbi Isai, because the Aruch HaShulchan and the Mishnah Berurah were also, and the Bach and the Marshal and all the Gedolim that spoke about this minig were all saying, we know there's a minig, and we're still telling you that you should be making kiddush on wine. So, and they had a reason to uphold the minig because wine was very expensive. So one thing is bar is that even if a person has a minig to make on schnapps, that already you see from all the Gedolim that there is definitely a mitzvah min hamuvchar to be making kiddush on wine. But someone's going to come and he's going to say, okay, look, that's the Mishnah Berurah from Radinshtetl, that's the Aruch HaShulchan, an Avardika, Litvisher. No, bring me what it says in the Balatanya. So I'll tell you in the Balatanya, in Sivkat Yud Aleph, he says, Mikol Makam B'Bedinas Eile, the yayin is b'yoiker. He says, look, wine's expensive by us. So yesh lahakol b'kiddush yoin. You could be makel and you can make kiddush on schnapps. We'll see schnapps in a moment. But on Chamer Medina, he says, even if you have wine, he does bring this, but he ends with these words. Umikol makoim at the end of Sif Yud Aleph. Mitzvah min hamuvchar lekadish leoilam al yayin. That means the Graz knew the minig, all the Gedolim knew the minig, and they're all ending with those words that you will get more of a mitzvah to listen to the halacha, which is to make kiddush on wine, than to uphold this minig. What should I tell you? They're mefurish saying, don't do the minig. They're saying they know there's a minig of making kiddush on Chamer Medina, and they're saying don't do the minig if you want the mitzvah of mufchar. They're not saying it's usher, but that's al kapanim, the aleph base. What about Avdala? So the Mishnah Berurah and Siman Reish Shadi Vav Sivkat and Ches, same thing, and the Ramah also. They all say that you're supposed to be lechatchila making kiddush on wine. Im yesh la yayin, it comes first. And the Mishnah Berurah brings down the Chazal were maflig about the mile of making havdalah on wine. It's a tremendous mitzvah, and it's a big skula. Easternly skula mikol amim. The Aruch HaShulchan brings this down in Sif Yud Daled. I must tell you something interesting. I saw that the Or L'Tzion, very interesting over here. The Or L'Tzion says that for the Svardim, it's lichatchila to be making havdalah even when wine is found on Chomer Medina. I tell you, that's not the pashtus, certainly not of the Ashkenazi Paiskim, and it's not even the pashtus of the Sfardish Paiskim. I see that Rav Avadja, he's very against this. He writes in Chazayin Avadja in Shabbos, Chelik Beis in the 124th page, Eina Muteres Bechomer Medina, when there's wine. So therefore, before we begin, the first and foremost you have to know is mitzvah min hamofcher to always be using wine. Which that Rabbi say you have to know. That's the Hakdama of today's year, and that's really the safe pasuk of today's year. In the end of the day, if somebody wants to know what is the mitzvah min hamofcher, how a person should be making havdalah, kiddush, any of these things, he should certainly be making it on wine. When I say wine, I mean obviously grape juice too. I don't want to get involved in the grape juice shaila, but what the Paiskim are discussing over here, they mean wine and grape juice. So Akopanim, that's number one. Now, is a say, what is Chomer Medina? Now that we know that there is this mitzvah min hamofcher to be not using Chomer Medina, but I want to know Tachlis Keret, what is Chomer Medina? And then, we'll be able to at least weed out the things that aren't Chomer Medina, which could be a problem in Bichlal to make Kiddush or Avdallah on them. So here you find a very interesting machlekes. You find that the Graz, the Shulchan HaRav, when he wants to touch up what is Chomer Medina, so in Sinin Kuf Pei Beis and Siv Beis, the Graz says, do you know what Chomer Medina is? It's the drink, says the Graz, that people dafka have during their meal. Listen to the Graz. B'mekayim is that wine. Now he's talking where there's no wine, and then everyone agrees if a place doesn't have wine, then of course you could use Chomer Medina for Avdallah, for Kiddush Bayoim. No, so he says in a case where there's no wine, so b'mekayim shein mayin v'sheicher ashar mashkim, that's Chomer Medina. Dahainu, says the Graz. What do I mean that it's Chomer Medina? He says Dahainu roiv anshe hamakim darka lekvoya aleim suda. Roiv people in that time, what's the drink that they have at the meal? Beer, whatever, we'll see, whichever beer. If you have a drink that's the drink that you normally have when you have a Suda, then that becomes the wine. In other words, if you ask the Graz, what is Chomer Medina? The word Chomer means wine. So what's the wine of your Medina? Well, when you have a meal and you have wine, so then normal people would have wine during the meal. That certainly was back then. Mashen came in a place where they don't have wine. So what's the wine that they have during the meal? What's the drink they have during the meal? So if you ask the Graz, what drink they have to figure out if it's Chomer Medina, the Graz is going to tell you it has to be the drink that normally you have with the meal. Comes again, Ramosha Feinstein, Ledaiti, it seems to be, Ramosha says, Punkt verkehrt, punkt. What bothers me the most is Ramosha doesn't even bring the Graz. Ramosha is in Chelik Beis, Siman Ayin Hey, and our Rebbe, Ramosha Feinstein, Zeichat Tzadik Levracha. I think he says the exact opposite. Says Ramosha, Chashivas Mashke, in explaining what's Chomer Medina, the Chashivas HaMashke is hu she'ein ashtiya machmat shetzrichen l'tzama. It's not the drink that you drink when you're thirsty. Ela shoisim oisam beloy tzarech legufam. It's a drink that you have not during the meal, not when you're thirsty. You have it as a drink time. Now we're going to sit and drink, says the Goyim of Moshe. Like a tea party. Ela b'shvil kavod hasuda. It's got to be a drink that you don't drink for thirst purposes. No one has a beer because he's thirsty. No one has wine because he's thirsty. You'd rather have water. Says Rav Moshe, this is called the Chomer Medina. It sounds like from Rav Moshe, when a person has a meal, he has to drink with the meal. Why does he have to have a drink during the meal? Because he's thirsty. You can't eat and not drink. That's why you drink during the meal. Rav Moshe says that's not the drink of Chomer Medina. The drink of Chomer Medina is not the drink that you have when you're thirsty. It's got to be the drink that the chashivas is the drink. Chomer Medina is, when a person would come to sit and have a drink with a friend. What drink would he have? This is like a little bit the opposite of the Graz, somewhat. It seems a little bit. Ramesh is saying the kavod of the drink is not the kavod that you're conveying the Suda with that drink. That's the drink of the meal, like the Graz says. He's saying it's the drink that a person would have by itself when he would want to have a chshivas. So what do you offer a guest when he comes? Rabbi say, it's very difficult now to go and make everybody happy. Ramesh and the Graz. Let's try and just before we get into the shilos, but just use for a moment case study. I'll give you an example. If a person wants to say, would Coca-Cola be good for Chomer Medina? All right, I don't work for Coke. Pepsi. No, Bear Mayim Chayim. Okay? So he wants to know, Could you have a Coke for Chomer Medina? Now we'll get involved in a moment if it's all water or not, etc. Okay, but so if you want to know, is a Coke for Chomer Medina? If he has the grass, I think it fits into the grass in a place where wine isn't found, and Roiv Ansha Makim Darkoi to have Suda with this drink. So normally you would have wine, and now what do you have? You don't have wine. What do you have? You have a Coke. According to the grass, a Coke is something that is clearly something you have during the meal. According to Reb Moshe, is a Coke something you have when you're thirsty? Yeah, for sure. How do I know? Because what does your mother always say? She says, why are you drinking Coke? It's just going to make you more thirsty, right? So obviously people have Coke when they're thirsty, right? Is Coke a drink that a person has? Stamazoi will say, yeah. Is Coke when you would have a get together with friends and you want to discuss stuff, what do you have? You would have a tea, you would have beer, you would have coffee, but you wouldn't necessarily be kaveh on a Coke. So it sounds like, and let's go the other direction. Is a beer a drink that a person would have when he would get and sit together with friends? Yeah, I think so. So according to Reb Moshe, that would be Chomer Medina. According to the Graz, is a beer the drink that people have during their meals instead of wine? I think most people don't have beers. I mean, I don't know what's going on these days in America, but I don't think most people are having a beer. So this becomes a very difficult parsha, when we're trying to figure out what's Chomer Medina. Do I look at the drink that he's normally having during the meal, and that creates that chashivas? The drink that he has during the meal, that creates the chashivas, that's the wine of the Medina, or fakert mamish. That what's the drink of the Medina? The drink that it has its own chashivas, not that it's chashiv because it's a part of a meal. Fakert, it's chashiv because it's its own meal. That's a big shaila, and that is also a very big impediment in trying to be kaveya what exactly is Chomer Medina. And the Rabbi said the plot thickens. Comes again the Mogen Avram in Kufpei Beis, and this is brought in the Mishnah Berurah and in Kufpei Beis and Siv Cotton Test. And now he tells us a new limitation in Chomer Medina. Says the Mishnah Berurah, he says, Kol ze dafka im oisa amenu Chomer Medina regilin the shtoisei b'mokim ahu. It has to be something that you're rugged to drink. Aval im ein shoisin elo lefrakim. If you only drink it, not, I guess we'll say infrequently. Periodically you drink that drink. After Betzim Chashiv, even though it's Chashiv, that's not Chomer Medina. And that, he says, is just like, they had some apple cider or something. The Mogen Avram is even more aggressive. He says, nearly, don't use schnapps. Elim Kain, Medina's Roiv Shtiyas Ahaman Yayish Bekol Yoim. So now we have a new limitation. What's Chomer Medina? Chomer Medina has to be the drink that you have daily, every day, the lashon of the Mogen Avram. Okay, even if you don't want to say as aggressive as every day, the Mogen Avram said the word every day. The Mishnah Berurah didn't say the words every day, but the Mishnah Berurah says, "Im ain't shoisin elo lefrakim." If the only time I drink it is, infrequently I drink it, periodically I drink it, so then that's not Chomer Medina. Rabbi say in Daheim, who remembers Shlivovitz? No, come on, you remember Shlivovitz, Rabbi say, come on, the Zayda. He had Shlivovitz by the bed. I think you all remember. He had Shlivovitz by the bed. No, Shachris, noch Shachris, whatever. A bissel Shlivovitz. No, then a bissel more, lunchtime, a little bit more. No, dinner, what do you mean? I remember when the doctor told Zaidi, the Shlivovitz, no more Shlivovitz. No more Shlivovitz. It's not good. The next day, Zaidi came to the room. Where's the Shlivovitz? Where's the Shlivovitz? The Shlivovitz is out of the room. So Bobby took it out of the room. Verstehst? No, the next day, the Shlivovitz was back. Bobby's bed was in the other room, but the Shlivovitz was back. They used to drink Shlivovitz at boys' night. They used to have the vodka, the good old Russians. Right? You all know the joke, Rabbi Isai. Zetzig, So what kills him, Rabbi Isai? The other 4%. Okay. But upon him, Tachlis Geret, Rabbi Isai, this creates a tremendous limitation in the ability to use Chomer Medina. Because let's go one by one. Rabbi Isai, do people drink beer every single day? I don't know. Do people drink schnapps every single day? I don't know. We'll see soon. Maybe a tea and a coffee you drink every day. But this, Rabbi Isai, is how we're going to don the shilas. The next shilah. Does Chomer Medina have to be alcoholic? Does it have to be an alcoholic beverage? You should know the Svardish at Paiskim all hold yes. The Hilchos Ketanis says, coffee? No way. There's not Chomer Medina. He says, what do you mean? It's not Dumia Diyayin because it's not alcoholic. And this is brought by the Or L'Tzion and the Yabia Oimer. The Svardish Paiskim, they all hold that in order to be Chamer Medina, the prerequisite is you have to be alcoholic. Now, Lemaisa, it's borrowed from our Paiskim, the Ashkenazi. I don't mean our Paiskim, I mean the Ashkenazi Paiskim. It's borrowed, did not hold of this, because the Ashkenazi Paiskim, and I mean as far back as the Mishnah Berurah, they're all dining on coffee and tea, and they're dining coffee and tea klape after the Seder, and they're all discussing if it's Chamer Medina or not. And no one ever dreamed that you should have to have a alcoholic tea and alcoholic coffee. And Alpha Pika, they're dining if coffee and tea is considered a Chamer Medina. So, but this is another limitation. There are definitely paiskim out there that require a beverage to be alcoholic in order to be right, to be Chamer Medina. The last shaila before we go to cases is the lashon of the Rashbam, which the Shulchan Aruch brings. The Shulchan Aruch in Siv Tes and in Kuf Beis Siv Beis, based on the Rashbam, says Chamer Medina ein yayin acher be'ir hazois. There's no other wine in the city iki im shecher except for beer. Therefore, you're allowed to do avdallah v'kein halacha. And the Shulchan Aruch starts out this halacha and says b'makim she'ein yayin matzui. When do you have the heter of Chamer Medina? Only in a place that there's no wine. This is not what we spoke about before, Rabbi Isai, that they had, they had wine and it was biyoker. The Shulchan Aruch sounds like if there's wine at all, you can't make kiddush on Chamer Medina. Now this, Rabbi Isai, is for sure neged the minig. This is for sure a big problem. That means for us it's over. We'll never be able to make kiddush on or avdallah. We'll never be able to make kiddush or avdallah on Chamer Medina, unless you have somebody who's a chayli, so he's not allowed to have wine and he's allowed to have a Chamer Medina. Okay, so that'll be an example of, even that I'm not sure about, Rabbi Isai. Maybe if you live in a place that there is wine, your personal situation, I don't know if this is subjective, I don't know. Maybe if you live in a place that there's no wine, that's when there's a heter Chamer Medina. But if you live in a place when there is wine, the fact that you can't drink wine, I don't know if that gives a heter according to the Shulchan Aruch. And this, Rabbi Isai, is the very big problem. This is what prompted the Shevet HaLevi to write the very famous tshuva in Chelik Gimel, in Siv Chafal, in Siman Chafav, Rav Elyashiv in the Kovetz Tshuvis, in Aleph, Siman and Zayin. They both have Shnei Neviim, Nisnavnu b'Nevuah Echaz. These great Neviim said the same Nevuah, and they said a very big kula, which, is a big limit for Klal Yisrael, because it seems to be mefurish in the Shulchan Aruch that you cannot make avdallah or kiddush if there is wine, and we know people do make kiddush and avdallah when there's wine, and they want to say a very big kiddush. They want to say, they have a kasha. Rabbi say today you have on the shelf is lined with wines and grape juices. And and people during the week, what do? They drink everything else. They drink every soft drink and every iced tea and every this and every that. Why aren't they drinking wine? In the olden days, the drink that people drank was wine. If the wine was available, they drank wine. So what's the pshat? In those days, they drank wine. So to use when there's wine, a different drink is not the Chamer Medina, because the drink that they would drink, if they would have wine, would always be wine. So therefore, wine always took precedence, and it was the one that a person had the value to it and the chshivas to it. But what if you have a situation in a time period like today that they have wine and they don't drink it when they have wine? They have wine and they don't drink wine. So that shows you that wine doesn't have that value and that chshivas. Now, no one's going to say you can't make kiddush or avdallah on wine, but it's not going to knock out someone else as being Chamer Medina. When the Shulchan Aruch says the words that you can only make kiddush on wine, when there's wine, that's because in those places, when there was wine, the drink of choice was wine. But by us, the drink of choice is not wine. So therefore, it could be that even if you have wine, you'll be allowed to make kiddush and avdallah on wine, even according to Shulchan Aruch. This, the Shevet HaLevi says, is nishtanu atvayim. He says even in places that the shchiach yayin, still people choose to make the kiddush. People choose to drink regular soft drinks. So he says, so masha yayin matzi v'shchiach be'ir ein ze goyrim shelo yikru gam sham mashkin Chamer Medina. He says this is a limitzchus. This is a limitzchus. So I don't know. With all this, Rabbi Isai, let's start and down one by one what is Chamer Medina. But as you realize, it's nish pashit. There is a minig out there that people make kiddush and avdallah and whatnot on Chamer Medina. Let's go now and at least try and get the right Chomer Medina for that minute. But you have to remember, there's a mitzvah and a mufcher no matter what. If there's wine, to make on wine, bein avdallah, bein kiddush. And you have to remember, number two, that the Shulchan Aruch does sound like you're not even allowed to when there's wine. We do have a limit schus for that. That's number two. And number three, now the hard job is to figure out, based on the Gedorim that we spoke about, according to Rav Moshe, Chomer Medina means the drink that has a chashivas unto its own, a drink that we get together to drink. According to the Graz, we have to make everybody happy. According to the Graz, it's got to be a drink that'll have at a meal. B'dafka. Not the drink you drink on your own. Adarabba, the drink you have at the meal. And then we have to make the Mishnah Berurah and the Mogen Avram happy. It has to be a drink that I drink very frequently, and not some drink that I drink every once in a while. And then maybe the Sephardic Poskim, they want to make sure that it's an alcoholic beverage. So we have a big agenda over here, a big job over here. So let's try to figure this out. First and foremost is whiskey. If I wrote a book about it. So let's try and don that shaila. Whiskey, wine, whiskey. So what is the wine, whiskey, and the halacha? This, the Mishnah Berurah in Reis Adivav, in Siv Katan Test, he says, that's Chomer Medina. Now, your first limit, Rabbi Isai, is when we're going to don Chomer Medina, it does not interest us what was Chomer Medina in Radin. I mean, it interests us. I shouldn't say it like that. But it does not interest us today, halacha l'maisa, what was Chomer Medina. Like I told you, in Radin Shtetl, whiskey was breakfast, was lunch, was supper, doesn't bring a raya to us. And the Aruch HaShulchan in Siv Yudalit, he says, we see that Gedolim, they were making Avdallah b'shachris al hayayish. That the Gedolim made shachris, they made kiddush on schnapps. This was clearly the minig. Rav Moshe in Chelik Beis in Siman Ayin Hey. He says, "Ein shum adam shoyse yayin v'yayish l'tzamai." No one uses it for the purpose of thirst. This fits with Rav Moshe, but you certainly will drink it together for kavod. So Rav Moshe says that's why schnapps is called Chomer Medina, because that's a drink that you'll get together. We'll get together to have whiskey together. I must tell you that Dor Letzion, he says whiskey, it's not the derech to drink it every day. He says it's not Chomer Medina. It's not Chomer Medina. No, what should I tell you? Whiskey is a big shaila. How can we make kiddush on whiskey if we don't drink whiskey every day? I don't know. Did the chevra that they, Lemaisa, are there chevra that drink whiskey every day? There certainly are goyim that drink every day whiskey, but I don't know if we look at goyim to be kofeya. I don't know. This is a very shver shaila. It's a very, very shver shaila. I must tell you, there's a bigger problem with whiskey, Rabbi Isai, is the problem that people take a small schnapps glazel and they make kiddush on a small schnapps glazel. Now, Rabbi Isai, the dinim of kiddush, there's a shear, like for Leil Seder, there's an amount in order to make kiddush that you have to put in the cup, and there's an amount that you have to drink. It's two separate halachas. There's one halacha that in order to be yotzei kiddush, it's kimat dina de gemara. You have to have a revius. The revius is called the kaishal bracha. Without a revius, you don't have the proper kais. Okay. Second of all, when you drink, you have to drink a maloi lukmov to be yotzei kiddush. Now, this poses a very big problem. And this is what prompted the Mishnah Berurah Siv Katan Lamed to very emphatically say, he says, first of all, if you want to make kiddush on schnapps, because you're accepting that it's Chomer Medina, well, you better make sure that you have a revius of schnapps in a cup, right? You got to get a cup, a revius. It doesn't have to be the Chazon Ish's revius, right? But you got to make sure that you have a cup that holds maybe 3.3 ounces if you want to go with the small shear. If you want to go with Ramesha shear, 4.1 ounces, the Chazon Ish shear, 5.1. But that's the amount that has to be in the cup. Then you have to drink a Maloi Lugmav. Says the Mishnah Berurah, okay, Legabe Maloi Lugmav, we could be Mako, that everyone could be Mitzarif together, like it says in Shulchan Aruch, that there's a shita that if I made it on a revius, so everyone could be mitzarif to get the maloi logmav, even if that's not lechatchila. And you should know there were chassidish gedolim, that's what they would do. They would take a regular revius, they would fill it up with schnapps, they would make kiddush on it, and I don't think they drank the whole thing, but they would give it out to all the chassidim to say shirayim, Rabbi Isai. So they would give it out to all the chassidim, and together they would drink the required amount. But you have to make kiddush, says the Mishnah Berurah. If you don't make it on a revius of schnapps, you're not yotzei. So this is another problem, Rabbi Isai, with schnapps. Now it's yadua that in the Veld, Aruch HaShulchan says like this, it's yadua, the Veld says over from the Marsham in Chelik Aleph in Siman Kuf Ayin Hey, that the Marsham, he said, look, what should I tell you? The Rabshitzer Taka, he made kiddush on a small schnapps glazel. And he said, you don't need the size. What's the pshat? So the Kanira says the Das Torah, it's based on a taz. Now the Taz is not here in Hilchos Kiddush, and he's not talking about Hilchos Kiddush. He's in Hilchos Brachas, and the Taz says, even though in order to make a bracha achrona, I usually need a revius, but by Shnap's, the Taz says the amount that's meshiv your nefesh, the amount which is, gives you a geschmack, is already enough to be considered the sheer svia to make a bar nefashis. So on that, says the Das Torah, if that's the requirement of the chashivas amount of schnapps to make a bracha akreina, now we could say that's also the chashivas in how much has to be in the cup. It's a big stretch, Rabbi Isai. One is a din in the svia, and one a shir in the svia, and one is a chashivas of a kais. Maybe in order for something to have the chashivas of a kais, Chazal made a takana that has to be a revius. A lot of times you see people, they make kiddush on schnapps, and then he takes a little sip. Now, what was that? According to nobody, that should work. It's not even the amount. If you want to tell me he drinks the whole shot, no, maybe you have the Das Torah. But if you take a little sip, so what's that? I don't know. Also, another thought, Rabbi said, that's all very nice when it comes to schnapps. I can hear schnapps has the chashivas, but what about liqueur? Liqueur, a little abyssal cherry liqueur, Rabbi said, does it for the Freuen, does it for the Vibers, and nicht for Insel. So why is that? And what does he do? Shakal Mevar, he takes a little sip of chocolate cherry with the banana liqueur. I remember when I was a kid, that was like a punishment to look at even. So, Gevein I don't know how pashut this is. So it comes out that there's a lot of chesroiness of make. I'm talking now lalacha. I don't chalila. A minig is a minig, and if you change around the oisius of minig, you get gehenim. But my job is to tell you v'shteit. And v'shteit is, it seems to be, there's about 5 problems in making kiddush on whiskey. Problem number 1 is bichlal, that maybe you shouldn't be making on anything except for wine. Problem number 2 is you have to have a kois that holds a revius. And most people, when they make schnapps, kiddush and schnapps, if they want to take a kois, gizint hate. But if they're not, then they're just taking a little shear, according to the Mishabura, you're not yaitse, because you don't have a revius. Problem number 3 is they're not drinking anything, they just drink a little sip. You have to drink at least a malay lugmov. Problem number 4 is most people, when they make kiddush and schnapps, they use a plastic cup, and that's a nacha problem. That's certainly not lechatchila. It could be a yaitse if it's a plastic cup, but it's certainly not lechatchila. And Moshe discusses this. And the last problem is that there's some people, they don't like schnapps bichlal. And by them, it's a shaila if they even chal the bracha. By him, it's like, taking gasoline. So I don't know about that so much. That's really not so pashut. Akaponim, so legabe schnapps, it came out not so pashut. Legabe beer, we lose most of our problems if you want to make kiddush on beer, because most people will make it in a cup, and most people are going to have a revius, and you can drink them like lugmav, but we still have the original problems that today it's not so pashut to make kiddush on schnapps, on Chamar Medina. But here again, we have some big issues over here. Now, if you want to know if beer is Chamar Medina, the Gemara says it is, the Mechaber says it is, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says it is, the Igros Moshe says it is, and Chelik Beis and Siman Ayin Hey. And this is, clearly the pashtus that beer should be Chamar Medina, but that was Rabbi Isai, maybe in a previous world. In our world, already the Aruch HaShulchan says that it's not so pashut to him. The Aruch HaShulchan in Sif Yudalid, he says that it's not so pashut to him that beer is Chamar Medina. He says, like Shaykh like Christ and Chamar Medina. One moment, let me read you the lashon. Ein etzleinu Chamar Medina's klal zulas yayish deroiv balabatim b'medina seina ein shoysim b'chol lo yayin v'lo shecher. The Aruch HaShulchan over here in Sif Yudalid already alludes to the fact that we don't have, most people today don't drink beer. The Aruch HaShulchan already in the Vardik says most people don't drink beer. He says most people drink schnapps. By us, Rabbi side, most people don't drink schnapps, and most people don't drink beer. And this is what prompted the Chazanish in the Dinim and Anagas, and it's also brought in the Orchos Rabbeinu in the 128th page, that says the Chazanish held that today it could be that beer is no longer Chamar Medina, because today most people do not have a beer every day. Right? I don't know. I mean, if I find out afterward that you guys do, so then okay, But Al Kapanim and Rabbi Isai, this I think we'll all agree to. Even if people have beer every day, but they don't have it during their meal every day, I think so. You do maybe satisfy the qualification of Rav Moshe. Now, I must admit that beer, I can hear that if you look at society at large, it's a very normal thing by people to be having a beer every day, at least in the Goyish society. Maybe we look at the Goyim to be Kaveh, what's called Chamer Medina, and maybe that would be good for Rav Moshe's Hagdara. But the Hagdara of the Graz, that the Hagdara of the Graz is that you have to have a beer during the meal. That's the drink you have during the meal. I don't know if most people have a beer during the meal. And this is, again, Bichlal not Pashit. It's Bichlal not Pashit to make Abdullah on beer because of this. Chav Meir talking about this topic. I guess that's why they asked the Rav from Eretz Yisrael to discuss this topic. But Al Kaponim, let me get weiter. Milk, Milch. This is a great example of, halacha doesn't change. Halacha never changes, right? But the Lamaisa could change. The milk was in Nidin that was discussed already, the Aderis. He says that Taka, Leyoshve Akfarim, those that don't have wine and beer, so bevadai they could make on milk. Beli Pikbook, there's no Shaila. No Shaila. Already the Birkei Yosef, the Chidah and Reish Sadivav and Siv Gimel, he says he can't make on milk. The Mishnah Berurah and Ziv Gotten Chavei, he says no way. The Aruch HaShulchan's not happy about it. And Rav Moshe, B'chelik Beis Simonai Nei says Shasatchak maybe yes, but let's try and figure out here if this would fit into our. It's true, you probably do have milk every day, but I think it's not a drink. If you have a guest that would come over, Lefi Rav Moshe's Hagdara would just say, "Come, let me give you a cup of milk." He'll give you a Misha Beirach if you give him a cup of milk. Mashain Kain, Lefi the Graz, is it a drink that you have at every day with your meal? I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe a child. I don't know. So I don't know. Today, to say that it's Chamer Medina milk is very schwer. It's very schwer. And I think that's the makubal, not to accept milk as being Chamer Medina. What about tea and coffee? Tea or coffee? So the Rav Moshe Sternbach in Chelik Dalid in the 436th page, he brings down that the Brisker Rav, Kois tea or coffee b'chalav sheshaitim kechelik me'asuda b'seif suda b'mkoim yayin. That could be Chamer Medina, and Cain I heard from the Brisker Rav. Now again, this is all assuming that you don't chayshish for the fact that today we have wine. But this does fit much better into our sugya. Many people will have a tea every day. Many people have a coffee every day. A tea and a coffee is a drink you'll certainly serve just to sit around and have a tea and a coffee. Lefi Rav Moshe, it works. Lefi the Balatani, I think it also works. A lot of people at their meal will have a tea at the end of the meal, will have a coffee at the end of the meal. It does have a certain value in Chshivas. So this taka is a much better Chamer Medina than what we've been talking about, but now you get involved. Agam, it's interesting. Ramesh himself in Chelik Beis and Simonai and Hay, he talks as a nutzad that may be why it wouldn't qualify as Chamer Medina. He says, L'chayra, it's just Mayim Mamish. He writes, it's true, you know, Afshel L'chayra Mayim Mamish, Hamatir Malchalav, La Yuchaloy Marshena writes Lishtais. Moshe opens up a nutzad over here and sounds like Basayf. He says, L'inyan T. He's not sure what's better, tea or milk. I just wonder out loud if today that it became very common to have a tea, to have a coffee, and these things, I think it would be that Ramosha would be able to be machriya and say a tea. The problem with a tea or coffee, Rabbi Isai, is that how do you drink the tea? This is a hard one. What's the Chamer Medina of tea? I can't drink the tea when it's hot because then I'm not going to drink it in the right amount of time. You have to drink the tea if you're going to drink one dot here and one dot there. So then that's, you didn't really drink an amount. You didn't drink a malay lukmav. Elamai, I'm going to wait till the tea cooled down that I could drink a malay lukmav. But is that the derech of how people drink it? I guess you have to look at the drink. And this drink is a drink that type of people drink every day. And therefore, even if you're not drinking it exactly the way that they drink it, but I suppose you do have to make it, warm, so you'll be able to drink it. You have to be able to have a malay logamav. So far, of all the drinks, it seems like tea and coffee are the best options of Chamer Medina. Where's it, Nageya? Sometimes you have a lady and she could be for a good life, and let's say she's pregnant and she's throwing up and she needs to eat first thing in the morning. So there's a whole shaila in the Paiskim. It's a big shaila. There's a Rav Moshe about this. There's a Mishnah Berurah about this. There's a big shaila in the Paiskim. Does she have a chiyuv of kiddush, or is she not chayiv in kiddush until her husband comes home? Maybe for her, it's not this man of Suda until her husband comes home. This is Ramesh has it sound like that. Others learn not like that. Others learn that she does have a Chi of Kiddush. So, and especially if she davened already, she davened Shachris, she has a Chi of Kiddush. But there's a lot of ladies, they're not holding, I don't know why, they're not holding by making Kiddush. It makes them, I don't know, they're afraid they're going to grow a beard or something, but that's really Abdullah. Okay. But anyways, so what do? So now you have a shtickle eitzah. Now you can tell them, look, what you can do is like this. What does she want? She's not feeling well. She's pregnant. She's nursing or something, and she needs to have something to eat. So you tell her, have a coffee and cake, right? So normally we tell you when you have a coffee and cake, have the cake first because of Kedim and Brachas. No, over here, we'll switch it and we'll be saimich that we're doing it in order, Kedim and Brachas. You're not supposed to be over on Kedim and Brachas, but over here we're doing it for a halachic reason. So we'll tell her, have first the coffee. And there's a big side that anyways, she doesn't have a Chi of Kiddush B'chlal. And mitzad sheni, even if she was to have a Chi of Kiddush, so the coffee will consider to be the Chomer Medina, and she'll have first the coffee, and then she'll have the cake, the Kiddush B'makam Suda. That's a chayra, a shtickle eitzah for a girl, a lady, that daven chakras, and she wants to have, she wants to eat something because she's very, very hungry. So that's l'chayra, a shtickle eitzah. Now, what about cola, Coke, and these types of things? So this is Yadua, Rav Moshe, and Chelik Beis, and Siman Ayin Hey, the Shitasai. He says Coke is not going to be a Chomer Medina. You don't invite friends over to sit together and have, it's true. The emphasis is that today the world became a little bit more, became less aggressive, became a little bit more Haimish, bezukt. So Mela, you would maybe but you wouldn't just have a Coke. You would maybe also have a Coke, but you would certainly have a situation where you invite over friends just for a beer, just for a tea, just for this. You won't invite friends over just for a Coke. So Lefi Rav Moshe, Coke is not Chomer Medina. Lefi the Graz, I'm very misupik. Lefi the Graz, I think that it would yes be Chomer Medina, because it's certainly the drink that people have at their meals. Of course, I wouldn't suggest anybody doing this because the Maisa, it's against Rav Moshe, right? But it's ironic that this is the one thing that we would have heard perhaps is yes, Chomer Medina, and this Rav Moshe is telling us is not Chomer Medina. Rav Shimon Eider brings down in a Sefer on Pesach, in the 20th parak in Or Samach Zayin, the Rav Aaron also said that it's not Chomer Medina, and Rav Yankov Kamenetsky is known to have said also it's not Chomer Medina, so that's already the Beis Din Agadol, so therefore you shouldn't be using Coke for Chomer Medina. Obviously, seltzer you shouldn't use, which leads us to the last shaila, which not ironically, but maybe is the best option for Chomer Medina, which would be natural orange juices, 100% orange juices, or 100% fruit juices, these types of juices. So this seems to be something that would satisfy everybody. It's a drink that is chashiv. You would certainly serve it to guests when you would have just to have drinks. You would certainly serve it to guests. It's certainly a drink that people have every day. It's certainly a drink that you have at the meal. Okay, it's not alcoholic, so it's not going to be good for the Sfardim. Okay, you still have to get over the fact that, Chomer Medina, some hold, if there's wine, you're not allowed to use anything else. It's true. But the only thing is that, now I'm being asked over here, that I'm talking about 100% fruit juices, which is true. It's zeya ba'alma klape de brach of shahakol. But mitzad its chashivas, it certainly does have a chashivas to it. It's not just water with some, petal in it, with a little bit of asis in it. It's something that has a chashivas. I wouldn't say that these chemical juices and things. I'm talking about the 100% ones. Now, it's interesting. In Eretz Yisrael, it's not so common to drink these. I shouldn't say it like that. It's not so common to drink them every day, but that's because they're expensive. So I once heard from Rav Elyashiv that for carrot, that doesn't take away its chashivas. When people can afford it, they certainly do have it all the time, etc. And certainly on Pesach, people have it because that's the time when, you have to make the natural juices. So therefore, that won't take away from its chashivas. And therefore, it's interesting if somebody would ask me that he can't drink wine, and for whatever reason, he can't get somebody to be moitziim in Avdallah, I would probably tell him of all the things we spoke about today, perhaps the best to make Avdallah on would be a natural orange juice, like 100%, one of these 100% orange juices, that would be the best. If he's a Svardi, I don't know what to tell him. So, L'maisa Rabbi Yisai, what came out of this sugya is that in a case,
the Rav froze the Rav froze for a few seconds. Hello, could you hear me?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Am I still frozen?
The Rav froze for about a minute. So if you can just go back, you started with the oranges.
What was the last thing that I said?
Oranges.
But did I
orange juice? Orange juice.
But did I say that studim of orange juice or no? Okay, so I'll say it again. The orange juice, l'chayra. Now it's good. The orange juice. Now it's good, right? Yeah.
Yes. Good.
The orange juice, l'chayra, is of all the shilas probably the best of all the shilas, even though it's not so simple because you don't have the svardim because it's not alcoholic. But orange juice is something that the fear of Moshe, you certainly would serve it to guests. It's a chush of a drink, you serve it to guests. Second of all, it certainly is, the gra is very good. You have it at a meal. It's something you have every day. And it has a value, it has a chshivah. So if somebody would call me, I would probably tell him to prefer to make avdallah on a natural orange juice. That's l'chayra. That's l'chayra. I must tell you that I'm being asked here, Shaila, what about during the 9 days? You should know because of this shilas, all the shilas we spoke about, I heard from Rav Elyashiv that during the 9 days, I don't know, I don't know if this is the Mekubal Dik Psakin in Chutz La'aretz, but I heard from Rav Elyashiv that since there are so many shilas in Chomer Medina, he told me it's preferred during the 9 days to make avdallah on grape juice. Now, why do I say make avdallah on grape juice and not just give it to the kid? Because you all know what goes on. What kind of kid do you have to find, Rabbi Yisai, to make avdallah? You have to find a child that is a bar chinuch of making brachas, okay? But he also has to be a bar chinuch that he's not of a veilus age, because then he also can't be having the grape juice during the 9 days. So that means we got to find a child that's between the age of like 5 to 8 or something like that. And Rabbi Yisai, he has to be listening to Avdallah. Now, you all know there's a lot of stuff going on during Avdallah, a lot of very interesting stuff going on. The fire, the besamim, things are falling in this, and geschmack, it's very not so easy to get a child to concentrate and to not talk between the Bari Priya Gofen all the way until it comes time to drink. No, and I'm older than my sister, so I'm supposed to be holding the nair, and I'm supposed to be getting the besamim, and it's my turn, and fingerlach, and toes, and everything. So you all realize there's a lot going on during Avdallah. So therefore, it's probably best, and that's what I do. I mean, halavai this year we won't have it, but that's what I do. That on Shabbos Chazayin, on Motzei Shabbos Chazayin, I make Avdallah on grape juice. I drink the smallest amount that I have to drink, and I prefer that than Chomer Medina, which is all these shilas. And you have to remember, all these shilas on Chomer Medina, if we come out that if you hold these are all not yotzei, then you're not yotzei Avdallah, right? Because if you're going with that Ada Seif Shita that the Shulchan Aruch holds, that you need to be in a place that doesn't have wine, so in Yerushalayim they have wine. Okay, maybe someone will say that during the 9 days, it's either you don't have wine, because you're not supposed to drink. But the Maisa, the Shitas of the Paiskim, anyways, is that the mitzvah you can make on grape juice. So that's what I do during the 9 days. And the Maisa, Rabbi Yisai, the people that have the minig, isn't the hate. But those that don't have the minig and they want to know what's the right thing to do, I think we all heard today that the right thing to do is to make kiddush on wine or akapanim on grape juice. And the Halavai will be zeiche to all of the skulas and all of the brachas. The Chazal tell the Mekadesh al Yayim, the Mavdal al Yayim, and Halavai will zeiche zayin taka to be able to be zeiche to continue weiter mit Hashem, to learn the Yainish Torah and to steig zusammen bez Hashem.